When I say the sequel to The Lion King, you will think about The Lion King 2 Simba's Pride, and that is true. But kids that watched The Lion King when it came out the first time had to wait 4 years for that. So before 1998, the closest thing to a Lion King sequel was a series of books called The Lion King 6 New Adventures. And you can guess from the name of it that it is a collection that includes 6 books. In this series, Simba and Nala have a son named Kopa, and each book tries to teach a simple thing to kids. In 4 out of the 6 books, someone will tell Kopa a story from the past, and he will learn the lesson of the book from it. The other 2 are a little bit different. In one of them there is no flashback and Kopa will learn from a mistake that he made, and in the other one, Kopa is a background character and Simba is the one that learns things. Book 1: A Tale of Two Brothers. Simba promised Kopa to show him the kingdom, just like how Mufasa showed Simba the kingdom. But crisis has happened. Animals are not willing to share the water hole, and because of that they are fighting each other. Simba wants to break his promise to his son, but Rafiki does not recommend that. When Simba wants to know the reason, Rafiki tells a story to Simba and Kopa. A story from the time that Mufasa and Scar were teenagers and the Pride Lands were under the rule of their parents, King Ahadi and Queen Uru. This story is a prequel to The Lion King, and it tells the origin of the Lion King characters and the Pride Lands. First we see the origin of Rafiki. Turns out he is not originally from Pride Lands. He is a man who is always traveling in order to gain more knowledge. And when he reaches the Pride Lands, it was during the drought season. The first person he meets is Zazu, mother of Zazu, who suggests him to rest in the shade. But when Rafiki tries to do as he is told, he gets attacked by Shenzi, Banzai and Ed. But they are stopped by Ahadi the Lion King. Here, it turns out that before the events of the Lion King, the hyenas used to live in Pride Lands, and they are allowed to hunt when they are hungry. But in situations like these, when the hyenas want to hunt for sports or because of greed, they will be stopped by the king. Also, there seemingly is an error in the book. In the text, it is said that Ahadi has black mane and green eyes, but in art, he looks just like Mufasa. And seemingly most fans choose the text description over the design, because in most fan arts, he has black mane, and it makes more sense to me, because it would show that the brothers have inherited different aspects of their parents. But when Ahadi is just like Mufasa, it is hard to believe that Scar is part of the family. You could say Scar took after his mother, but the fact that Uru is not in the story and she just gets mentioned by name and there is no official design of her doesn't really help. Also here we get to know that the real name of Scar is Taka, and we can already see that the seeds of darkness is already planted in his heart. Mufasa is the firstborn and the future king, and because of that, Ahadi spends most of his time with Mufasa and barely spends any time with Taka, and because of that, Taka doesn't get along with them, especially Ahadi. The Lion King suggests Rafiki to spend the night with them. Mufasa and Rafiki decide to sleep outside of the cave. But when they are asleep, a snake tries to attack them and fails. Rafiki realizes that the attack was planned by Taka, but he decides not to tell Mufasa about it. I am not sure if Taka just didn't like Rafiki or he has already planned killing his own brother. The next day, Ahadi has promised his sons to take them to hunting with himself. But he breaks the promise because he is busy making peace between the animals because of the drought. And when Taka complains, he tells him to learn good behavior from his brother. And here we will see the reason that Taka is evil. It does not justify the bad things that he eventually will do, but it makes the audience understand him a little bit. In Scar's point of view, his father is neglectful toward him. He thinks his father hates him and his brother is getting all the love and attention. It is not true, but I can see where Taka is coming from. Ahadi loves both of his sons, but he is unintentionally scarring his second-born mentally. He just wants to make Mufasa ready for becoming the next king, but he doesn't know that by spending most of his time with Mufasa, Taka would become cool. He just wants the best for both of his sons. But he doesn't know that by always setting Mufasa as a good role model for his brother, Taka would hate them even more. I understand that Ahadi, as a king, has a lot of responsibilities, but that doesn't mean that he should forget that he is a father as well. At the moment of this story, his sons are teenagers or young adults. But from my understanding, it is not the first time that a thing like this has happened. If Ahadi has been like this since his sons were born, then I cannot blame Scar's bad behavior. Yeah, a teenager should be mentally ready for a broken promise, but a kid cannot. Never ever break a promise to a kid. The most insignificant of things for an adult to a kid can be a traumatizing event. If you can't keep it, then don't promise. Imagine this. Taka, as a kid, felt neglected. His life is so unfair. He thinks his father hates him. Each time his father promises him, he would break it. Each time his father wants to spend time with him, duty calls him. There is always something more important than his second son. Then, how come he always spends time with Mufasa? Why doesn't his royal duties call him when he is with his other son? Taka thinks he is nothing but a burden to his father. He should have never existed. His father just wanted one son to be his next in line, but he ended up with two sons. Now he has an extra duty that he never asked for. His brother gets all the love and attention. Why? Just because he is going to be the next king. All Taka wanted was just a little love and attention from his father. And the only way to get that is by being the future king. If Ahadi showed more of his love to Taka, he probably would never want to be a king in the first place. Of course, these are all just what Taka believes and is far from the reality. Ahadi doesn't spend time with Taka because he is the king, and it is his responsibility to make sure his people are having a good life, and he would spend his remaining time with Mufasa because he is the next king. He has to make sure Mufasa would become a wise king so that the future of his kingdom wouldn't be doomed. He loves Taka as much as he loves Mufasa. He just can't make a balance between being a king and being a father. The only mistake he made was that he thought Taka would understand that. He wasn't aware of how terrible Taka feels. If he knew, he would spend more time with Taka. But he failed to understand his second son. He failed as a father and that would doom the life of both of his sons and his kingdom. But of course, these are just a fan theory. Maybe Ahadi did spend enough time with him and Taka is just a spoiled brat. But what I understand from reading this book is that Ahadi have been unintentionally neglectful toward Taka. Some fans even went beyond that and theorized that Ahadi secretly hated Taka and was abusive to him. But again, it is just a theory and not a fact. But I wouldn't be against exploring the idea in an alternate universe. One of the reasons that led to this theory is Scar's real name. I didn't mention it in my first video, but now that it is more relevant, I will say it here. Almost all of the names in The Lion King are actually African words. For example, Simba means lion, Srabi means mirage, Rafiki means friend, Nala means gift, Mufasa means king. But Taka has two meanings. One meaning is to want, but the other one is trash. Just imagine your brother being named king, but you were named trash. What kind of parents would name their kid trash? But I think that is not really the case. I believe these names don't have the meaning they have in real life. Simba in real life means lion, but I think in the world of the Lion King, it is just a name and doesn't have meaning. I don't think that Mufasa looked at his son and thought, my son is a lion and because of that I will name him Lion. That would be ridiculous. But even if they are aware of what those names mean, that wouldn't confirm that Scar's parents hated him. Because Taka also means to want, and that isn't an objectively bad thing. There is a fan comic that actually made a heartwarming sense out of why he is named Taka. In the rest of the story, it gets established that the hyenas are already friends with Scar, and a conversation between them and Scar gives him an idea. He thinks if he do something that would make Mufasa look unworthy, then their father would break the traditions and choose the second born as the future king. And so he comes up with a plan. There is a buffalo named Boma who is not willing to share the waterhole with other animals. And Taka suggests Mufasa to convince Boma together while their father is busy. But Taka would say something to Boma that would make him attack Mufasa. Taka thinks doing this would make it look like as if Mufasa has started the fight, and that would make Mufasa look bad. But it does not go according to the plan. Mufasa runs away from Boma, but turns out while Boma was attacking Mufasa, the other buffaloes were attacking Taka. One of the buffaloes hit Scar's face with his horn, and that would knock him out. The fight would be stopped by Ahadi, who thanks to Rafiki and Zazu became aware of the fight. Taka would be sent to Pride Rock so that Rafiki would heal him. Taka didn't take any fatal damage, but he will have a scar for the rest of his life. Taka admits what he wanted to do, and then he said that from now on his name will be Scar, so that he would never forget his mistake. And I think he did this as a cover for his future plans, because I don't believe that he is really sorry for what he did. He would probably continue being the backstabbing person that he is. After a few days, the drought would end. Zazu would become the eyes of the king in the sky, and Rafiki would stay in Pride Lands to help the kingdom. When Rafiki ends the story, Simba and Kopa would thank him for the story and its lessons. Kopa learns to be more understanding and respectful for his father's duties, and Simba learns to keep his promises to his son. So he would first show Kopa the kingdom, and then he would deal with the crisis. This story is good for what it is. It is not ambitious, but it does not need to be anything special. This series of books is probably just something for kids who have just learned how to read, and it is supposed to be just a small companion to the movie. And it probably was never going to be canon. Considering that, I am totally fine with its simplicity. I like the idea that Zazu was never part of the kingdom, and Rafiki suggests the king to use her as help, and her son Zazu would help the future king. But I would prefer Rafiki to be part of Pride Lands for a much longer while. To me, Rafiki looks like as if he has been a wise man of the Pride Lands for several generations. But that is just my personal preference and not a problem. Book 2. Nala's Dare. Kopa's monkey friends dare him to jump across a gorge, but Kopa runs away. Even though he did the right thing by avoiding danger, he felt humiliated. That's when Rafiki comes out of nowhere, who is aware of what happens. And in order to teach Kopa that there is a difference between bravery and stupidity, he tells Kopa to ask Nala to tell him the story of Ni. And Kopa does as he is told. So Nala tells Kopa and Simba the story of Ni. A story from the time that Scar was the king and Nala was just a cub. Nala was spending time with her friends, Kula, a female cub, and Chomvi, a male cub. Chomvi said that lions are the best animals and started to make fun of other animals. But Nala disagreed and said that they are just different. Then Chomvi said not only lions are the superior animals, but also the lions of the Pride Land are the superior lions. Nala said that she believes the other lions are just like them, and because of that, Chomvi dares Nala to talk to a lion from another pride. And Nala accepts it, under the false belief that they would never see a non-Pride Lander lion. But Chomvi points out that a rogue lion is lurking in the tall grass, and the ignorant Nala tries to talk to the lion, an act that Kula doesn't recommend at all. But when Nala gets a few steps closer to the rogue lion, they hear an emergency roar, so the cubs get back to Pride Rock. Turns out the lionesses were also aware of the rogue lion and they scared him off. But Nala still couldn't refuse a dare, so she tried to find that rogue lion at midnight. Kula begs Nala to avoid this stupidity, but Nala wants to prove her bravery, so she doesn't listen to her. A choice that Nala soon regrets because the moment she leaves the Pride Rock, hyenas try to attack her. The rogue lion comes to the rescue. The rogue lion says that his name is Ni. When he wants to escort Nala to Pride Rock, more hyenas come, and this time there is too many of them. So Serafina comes to help, who thanks to Kula realized her daughter is in danger. When the hyenas are gone, they go back to Pride Rock. Serafina tells the other lionesses about Ni's bravery, and Chomvi tells Nala that he is sorry for teasing her. After a short while, Ni says his goodbyes and leaves. This story is also simple but good. My only problem is that Scar wasn't in it at all. I would like to see how he ruled the Pride. Was he really brooding in the cave throughout his entire time of ruling the Pride Lands? Also, Am I the only one who thinks Neil looks like Nala? First time I saw the cover of the book, I thought he was his long lost father or something. Book 3, Vulture Shock. The story doesn't include any flashback. Kopa is hanging out with other lions, and here we see that other male lions exist in the pride. The movies try to be realistic and there is only 1 or 2 male lions in each pride, and the rest are lionesses and cubs. But this series of books is seemingly trying to make their pride look more like a human civilization. One of the lions mentions his family tree, which makes Kopa curious because he has no idea what it is. He mistakes it for an actual tree, which makes the lions roll on the floor laughing. One of them tells Kopa to ask Simba about it, so Kopa goes to his father. But Simba is too busy because of problems at the water hole. It's always about the water hole. So Kopa wanders around to find his family tree himself. Later, Simba tells Zazu that Kopa wants to know about their family tree, but he doesn't know where to begin. So Zazu takes Simba to a cave that has the royal family tree painted on it. When Simba wanted to show it to Kopa, he was nowhere to be found. Turned out when he was trying to find his family tree, he got kidnapped by vultures. So they sent a message to Simba to exchange Kopa with a meal, including many animals like mongoose, snake, gazelle, elephant, and hyena. Yes, in this book, there are still some hyenas living in Pride Lands. Simba and Nala trick the vultures to tell them where Kopa is. The next day, a lot of animals went to where Kopa was. The vultures were happy to have a huge meal, but Simba and Nala were hiding behind the hippo and they surprised the leader of the vultures. With the leader's life at the king's hand, they have no choice but to give Kopa back to them and let go of their meal. After saving Kopa, they tell him what a family tree really is. I think this one is a downgrade in comparison to the previous books. It is not bad, it is just too simple. Yeah, all of them are simple, but at least they have a good lesson in themselves. First book was about the importance of a promise, and the second book was about the true meaning of bravery. But this one doesn't go deeper than, remember kids, don't go far from home without your parents. Yes, I know kids should know this stuff, but the other books of the series had lessons like this alongside deeper lessons. Book 4, A Snake in the Grass. There is a lion cub named Afua who is Kopa's best friend. But recently Afua is hanging out with a cheetah cub named Bebo. And I don't know if Afua is hanging out less with Kopa or Kopa is just jealous, but all that matters right now is that Kopa hates Afua now. And Timon and Pumbaa, wanting to rebuild that friendship, tell Kopa a story about when adult Simba was hanging out with them in the jungle and hadn't become a king yet. A snake tries to eat Timon, but he is saved by Pumbaa and Simba. The snake runs away. He later realizes that they are friends, so he needs a plan in order to eat Timon. This snake, just like other cartoon snakes, can hypnotize. So he meets each friend individually and uses his power to manipulate them and make them forget they have met the snake. His plan almost works. His manipulations, alongside Timon's attitude, make them separated for a while. But it does not last long because Simba and Pumbaa think more of what they have started to believe and realize that they have been manipulated. And the moment that the snake almost had Timon, They save Timon again, and this time they make sure the snake wouldn't strike back. After the story, Kopa learns that a friendship is based on trust. Then he goes back to Afwa to make up for their misunderstandings. Book 5. Follow the Leader. We see more of Simba struggling as a king. Animals of this kingdom are too ignorant, always arguing over stupid stuff. And Simba is really tired of it. He's thinking about taking a break, maybe hanging out with Timon and Pumbaa, and just ignore the fact that he is a king for a few hours. But Zazu and Rafiki tell him duty before pleasure. When Simba is dealing with the animals, Rafiki gets informed that the baboons in grass walls are in deep trouble, which worries Rafiki because grass walls is his homeland. So he leaves the Pride Lands immediately, but he tells Zazu first. Simba gets informed about Rafiki and goes to help him, and he reaches him just in time to save him from a rhino. When they reach grass walls, they see that it has become a wasteland. Rafiki finds the baboons and realizes that their leader is his cousin Jelani. Turns out Jelani is a lazy ruler, and just like Scar, he turned his beautiful land into a lifeless one. Rafiki tells Jelani that he wants to move them to a better place. When Jelani disagrees, Simba comes and forces him to accept it. The next day, they start moving. After a while, a leopard attacks them and gets a baby baboon, but Simba saves him. After more walking, a baboon falls down from exhaustion. Jelani gently lifts her onto his back because she is his aunt. Everyone is surprised to see any act of kindness from Jelani, but they continue walking, and after that, they finally reach their new home, a beautiful jungle with a big waterfall. The next day, Jelani thanks Rafiki and Simba for opening his eyes. He tells them that when he saw his aunt in that situation, he realized that his selfish actions almost killed his troops. And he tells them that from now on, he will be a good leader. After that, Rafiki and Simba go back to Pride Rock. Book 6. How True Zazu. Zazu tells Kopa a story about when he had just become Mufasa's steward. Zazu's mother taught him too well. Zazu not only reported the important stuff to Mufasa, but also everything else. Even the most useless of facts had to be reported to the king, and that would sometimes lead to misunderstandings or problems. And because of that, one day a few kids decide to troll Zazu. At first, they tell him that a monster is in the Pride Lands, and the next days they will tell him other lies, and it would slowly make Zazu's word less valuable to Mufasa. But it would all change one day when Zazu discovers an army of ants heading toward Pride Lands and eating everything in their way. He tells Mufasa, and at first he doesn't believe it, but then he chose to give him one more chance. Zazu tells him that now the ants must have reached the forest, so Mufasa enters the forest, still not believing Zazu completely. But he soon jumps out of the forest, unable to see because his body is covered with ants. Zazu tells Mufasa to follow his voice to the river. When Mufasa is saved, he thanks Zazu and they go back to Pride Rock. They tell the animals of the disaster and Mufasa comes up with a plan. The ants need to cross a river in order to reach Pride Lands, and it is possible for them thanks to the rocks that can act as a bridge for them. There are boulders at top of the falls that act as a dam. When the ants are trying to cross the river, Zazu will inform Mufasa and he, alongside a few strong animals, will move the boulders, and that will increase the flow of the water and that would get rid of the ants. Their plan works and Pride Lands is saved, and Zazu is considered a hero. After that, Zazu learns to always check his facts and only report the necessary stuff to the king. Later, 6 New Adventures would get 2 spin-offs in form of German audiobooks. First one, named Friends for Life, is about Kopa saving a hyena cub named Asante from a snake, and after that they would become friends. And I like it, but I can't say the same to the second one. The second story, named Fight for the Throne, is too complicated for its own good. I usually prefer ambitious stories over simple ones, but this single story convinced me that sometimes simplicity can be beautiful. This story is ridiculous. It disrespects all the character developments that Simba had in the Lion King movie. In this story, a few hyenas make a plan to make Simba lose in a challenge, and they succeed, and because of that, Simba exiles himself to the jungle again, and Kopa goes with him. But Nala stays at Pride Land. After years, Nala goes to the jungle to convince Simba to challenge the hyenas and become a king again. But this time Simba won't get convinced. So instead, Kopa asks an elephant from the jungle to defeat the hyenas in a challenge. And when the hyenas face defeat, they admit that they have defeated Simba through cheating. And because of that, Simba comes back and reclaims the throne, and the hyenas get banished. Do I even need to say something to prove why this one is bad? I have no idea what they were thinking when they were writing this one. It turns Simba into a very unlikable person and ignores everything that makes him a great character. The real Simba would challenge those hyenas after a few days and save his people. But in this story, Simba was a coward, as if he has learned nothing. And also the story is just a bad retelling of the original movie. I won't go through this much detail when I want to discuss the other Lion King books. At first I wanted to talk about all the Lion King books in one video, but then I decided to turn it into 2 videos. One video about 6 New Adventures and one video about the other Lion King books. And my reason for that is the interesting legacy of this series of books. A lot of discussions in the Lion King fan base and a lot of the Lion King fan contents exist because of this miniseries, and they are all about this question: where is Kopa? I can imagine some kids read these books in 1994 and then they were confused when they watched The Lion King to Simba's Pride. They would have probably wondered about it for a while and come up with a lot of theories in order to connect 6 New Adventures to Simba's Pride. Or maybe they were aware of the concept of alternate timelines and they just did it for fun. But whatever the reason was, it was a topic that the internet culture of the 90s and 2000s really liked. For teenagers and some young adults, the fact that cartoons that we watched as a kid have some dark secrets to it is fascinating. And I am not sure why, but some people want the things that they watched as a kid to grow up with them. And I am not making fun of anyone because I am part of those some people. I myself can't really get into anything new as an adult. I should consume adult media if I want more mature stuff. But I just simply don't have as much fun as consuming the kid media that I am nostalgic for. And because of that, instead of official media, I go to the world of fan-made media. There, I will find people like myself, people who just like me want their childhood to grow up with themselves. People who are much more talented and ambitious than me. And instead of just wishing, they will create in order to make their dreams a reality. What I want to say is, don't refer to all the people who are obsessed with a franchise as a toxic man-child. I know some people on the internet are mean or weird, but that's only one side of it. The other side is the people who are obsessed in a good way. Creative people who are always welcoming new people to their fan bases. People that instead of complaining and arguing are at peace with the current state of their beloved franchises. And if there are stuff that they wish it existed, they will create it themselves. They probably have a life outside of internet, and they use their free time to enjoy their life through this stuff. And it doesn't mean they refuse to grow up. It just means they try to keep some of their innocence from childhood so that they would stay positive and avoid becoming cold. The most popular theory is that Kopa is dead, a fan idea that I have no idea who came up with first because it have been adapted so many times in the fan base. The story goes like this. After the events of 6 new adventures, but before the events of Simba's Pride, Kopa meets Vitani, similar to how Kiara met Kobu, and they will become friends. They will secretly continue their play dates. But one day Zero would find it out, and when Kopa wants to spend time with Vitani, he meets Zero instead. And Zero, being the psychopath that she is, brutally murders Kopa. And that is why Simba is so overprotective in The Lion King 2, and why he hates the Outlanders so much. This is the base story, and later fans would add more details to it. If I could turn one fan idea into an official story, it would be this one. But as I said, this is a fan idea and not a canon story, and I have few proofs to debunk this theory. My main proof is that why is Nala so chill about Kiara? If they had another cop before Kiara that died, wouldn't Nala also be very overprotective as well? But no, Simba is the only paranoid one, because he is the one that has lost a loved one. The reason that Simba acts the way he does is because he is still traumatized from the death of his father. Yeah, Nala might have had a rough life under Scar's rule, but that is nowhere near what Simba went through. Another proof of mine is why Simba had a nightmare about Mufasa's death and not Kopa. Isn't death of a son much more tragic than death of a father? Wouldn't Simba at least see a Kopa cameo in his nightmare? And my third and final proof is why Zero is alive. If someone killed your son, wouldn't you do anything and everything to make sure that his killer would have a slow and painful death? Some would also say that the cop at the end of The Lion King 1 is different from Kiara. And I think that is just an artistic choice. But again, Nothing can stop an interesting theory. You could say maybe 6 New Adventure is in fact canon, and Kopa at some point did in fact die, and Nala was much more heartbroken and traumatized than Simba, to a point that the only way to keep Nala alive was to do some magic in order to make Nala forget that she had a son in the first place. Maybe you could say Simba usually has nightmares about Kopa's death, and that scene in The Lion King 2 is one of the fewer times that he has a nightmare about Mufasa's death. And maybe the reason that Simba didn't kill Zero after Kopa's death is because Simba is one of the most heroic characters of all time. Maybe Simba wanted to kill Zero, and maybe at one point he did almost beat her to death. But he stopped because he remembered that Zero has 3 children. Maybe he thought about the death of his father and remembered how traumatized he was after that. He didn't want to do the same thing to another cub. Maybe after he realized that Scar had children, he felt guilty. I know Simba wasn't the one that killed Scar, but if he knew he had children, he would do anything to save Scar, so that no other cub would go through the hell that he went. Maybe after the death of Scar, Simba promised himself that Scar's mate would stay alive, so that those kids would at least have a mother, and even death of Kopa wouldn't make him forget his promises. But that is too much of a stretch for me. I don't think that this big of a story would just be a background element. But again, I won't blame anyone for believing these theories, because after all, who dislikes a good story?